Yo, what is up guys? Welcome back to the SUPES channel. My name is Matthew Ramos, and on this channel I aim to entertain, inform, and inspire using the topic of discussion as always, which is superheroes. So guys, with Avengers Endgame finally hitting theaters, and this being such an amazing ending to this 11-year journey, one of my biggest positives about Avengers Endgame was that it really felt like a conclusion to the 21 movies that came before it. This film revisited many things from past MCU movies, and because of that, it really felt like this whole conclusive wrap up to this whole story. Now, you can bet your ass that there was a ton of callbacks to other previous MCU films, and in today's video, I'm gonna list every single one of the callbacks from every other MCU movie that happened within Avengers Endgame. So getting right into the most obvious callback to previous MCU films is the callbacks that the plot basically revolved around. First, we have the Avengers traveling through the quantum realm back to other previous MCU movies and other previous events from the original 2012 Avengers movie, The Battle of New York, back in 2012. Then they also traveled to Asgard back in 2013 from Thor: The Dark World, as well as Morag in 2014 from Guardians of the Galaxy, and finally Vormir, of course, back in 2014, but before the events of Avengers Infinity War, which is we saw the debut of Vormir as well as the location of the Soul Stone. So these four locations were all the locations that the second act basically revolved around. We also saw them go back to Camp Lehigh, which is the camp where we first saw in Captain America: The First Avenger, where we see Steve Rogers training, and we also get that scene where he takes down the flagpole, and we also see Cap revisit Camp Lehigh back in Captain America: The Winter Soldier, when they're going into the underground SHIELD bunker, as Camp Lehigh was the first SHIELD facility to investigate further information about the Winter Soldier, and this is where they first come in contact with Artem Zola, who has uploaded his mind to the computer systems over at Camp Lehigh. So these 5 locations are 5 previous locations that we have seen throughout MCU history. The next callback in Avengers Endgame actually happened to be the location of New Asgard. So New Asgard is located in a Norwegian village known as Tonsberg. Well, Tonsberg is actually a callback to the battle site of Odin and his Asgardian army versus the Frost Giants back in 2011 Thor, the original Thor movie. This is where this battle took place, and this is where the rest of the Asgardians have basically taken over this village, and this is where New Asgard is gonna, prosper. This is also a callback to Captain America: The First Avenger. So in that opening scene of that movie, we see Red Skull go into that town and take the Tesseract. So this, location, this Norwegian village of Tonsberg is a callback to the first Thor, where the battle between the Asgardians and the Frost Giants took place, as well as Captain America: The First Avenger, where the Red Skull originally captured the Tesseract. The next callback in Avengers Endgame takes place towards the beginning of the movie. After the time jump has occurred, we see Natasha Romanoff at Avengers facility, and we see her making a peanut butter sandwich, and on that same table you can see her ballet slippers, which is a major callback to her origin story, which we saw a bit of in Avengers Age of Ultron. Once her, Steve, and Ant-Man go to visit Tony as well, in the scene right after that, we also get to see her donning her Hawkeye arrow necklace that we've seen her wear in previous MCU movies, but this was a fun little nod to her relationship with Hawkeye, which we saw plays a huge part in this movie. One of the things I noticed in Avengers Endgame was that there was a ton of callbacks to Avengers Age of Ultron, which wasn't really a movie that everyone was saying that they needed to watch going into this film, but after watching it, there was so many callbacks to this movie. So at first we got Black Widow and her ballet slippers on the table, of course, which I just discussed, but we also have Cap lifting Thor's hammer in that final battle sequence. This was a callback to of course, one of the best scenes in the Age of Ultron, where all of the Avengers go one by one trying to lift up Thor's hammer, and of course Cap tries lifting it, but he only nudges it a bit, and then he stops trying, and Thor gets a sense of relief out of him not being able to lift the hammer, but he finally does it in this movie. And after he does do it, Thor, of course, says, "I knew it," which was a fun little nod to Thor doubting the fact that Cap can lift Thor's hammer. Another one of these Avengers Age of Ultron callbacks was more towards the beginning of that movie, where Tony is discussing about how the world, he's trying to build a suit of armor around the world. And he discusses this in Avengers Endgame after he gets back and discusses it, brings it up amongst Steve, after basically calling him out because he, in Avengers Age of Ultron, after he had that vision where all of the Avengers were dead, which was another callback to this movie. Not that all of the Avengers were dead, but Cap's shield, of course, was extremely broken. And we saw Cap in Avengers Endgame wield a shield that looked exactly like that shield we saw in Tony's vision. So that was a huge callback. But after Tony has that vision, we also see that, you know, Tony, his whole entire arc for Avengers Age of Ultron is changed. Now he wants to protect the world before Thanos gets to Earth. But of course, that doesn't go the right way and he ends up creating Ultron. But this was a fun little nod at the beginning of Avengers Endgame where Tony brings that up. And then he also brings up the fact, the exchange that he had in Avengers Age of Ultron where him and Cap are going back and forth and he says, "We'll lose." And Cap says, "We'll do that together too." And Tony, based in Avengers Age of Ultron, in Avengers Endgame, excuse me, Tony brings that up to Cap and says that he wasn't there when they lost. They weren't together when they lost. So he calls Cap out on that. And those were some notable, very notable callbacks to Avengers Age of Ultron. Now the next callback is definitely one of the more notable ones that we witnessed in Avengers Endgame, as Captain America is on his way to retrieve Loki's scepter. Now he gets to the elevator and it's filled with those Hydra agents that weren't known to be Hydra agents in Avengers, the 2012 Avengers movie. But we find out that that's how they ended up getting the scepter that created Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. So that's how they got that scepter to create them. But we see Captain America pull up to that elevator and we start getting nods that Captain America is about to go through that same iconic elevator fight scene that we saw from Captain America, the Winter Soldier. But that actually doesn't end up happening. And he, you know, addresses the scepter and how he's gonna take the scepter. But then he whispers into Agent Sitwell's ear and he whispers, "Hail Hydra." This, once I saw this on screen, I immediately thought of that, you know, Elseworld storyline called Secret Empire, where Captain America actually turns out to be a secret Hydra double agent. Now, even though he wasn't a Hydra double agent, this still gave me those feelings of that comic book when Captain America was revealed to be a part of the Hydra this whole time. Now, getting into my favorite callback of Avengers Endgame. So as we saw the whole plot unfold, we see Captain America staring at Thanos' entire army as they are coming to invade Earth and take it all over. But then we hear Sam, Falcon, you know, contact Captain America through his earpiece. And before we see the Doctor Strange's ring open up where Black Panther walks through along with Shuri and Okoye, Sam says, "On your left." Now this was a very extremely notable callback from Captain America the Winter Soldier. The opening scene of that movie featured Sam running and Captain America, of course, surpassing him multiple times, saying, "On your left, on your left, on your left." Every single time he passed them while they were running around per se, the Washington Monument. And this was just such a great line to bring back. And what a way to open up such a beautiful scene where all of the Avengers assemble. But this was my favorite callback of Avengers Endgame, and it was definitely one of the more notable ones. And then as the heroes progress through that final battle, we get that beautiful climax where Iron Man assembles the Infinity Stones in his arm and he snaps his fingers. But before he does that, one of his final words alive in the MCU is, "I am Iron Man." This was a major callback to the ending of the first Iron Man movie, where that movie ended with him saying, "I am Iron Man," revealing to the world that Tony Stark is the hero behind the armor. And this was just such a beautiful callback, and it really puts it into perspective how full circle everything came to be. I mean, with the character of Iron Man, we started off with a narcissistic character and we ended with a selfless hero that sacrificed his life so everyone could live. And the beginning was with him saying, I am Iron Man, and it ended with him saying, I am Iron Man. And that was such a beautiful callback and really just a beautiful ending to the character of Tony Stark within the MCU. Now, of course, as Tony Stark snaps his fingers and begins to slowly die out, we also get the next very emotional funeral scene. But this funeral scene featured a mysterious teenager that a lot of people were questioning. But this kid, his name is Harley Keener, and he is the actor who played the young little kid from Iron Man 3 back in 2013. This was an insane callback, and I'm so happy that they brought him back, because just after the end of Iron Man 3, everyone was really speculating that this kid was going to become the next Iron Man. But I just loved seeing him return because it really made a huge callback to that movie, and it brought back that emotional connection between that little boy and Tony Stark, and it just all came full circle, and it was beautiful to see Harley Keener come back and reprise his role as that little kid from Iron Man 3. And we got to see him in Avengers Endgame. He's all grown up and he's mourning over Tony Stark in this funeral scene. Now, the next callback is definitely one of the more heartfelt ones, as when I saw this scene unfold, tears literally began streaming down my face, if they weren't already, after Iron Man died. But this was a scene between Morgan Stark and Happy as they're sitting on a bench right in Tony's cabin, and Morgan says that she wants a cheeseburger. And this is a callback back to Iron Man 1. After he escaped the 10 rings and returned home, the first thing he does is Happy gets him a cheeseburger from Burger King, and that's what he's eating throughout that press conference of him returning back to the world after, you know, everything he went through in becoming Iron Man and being held captive by the 10 rings. But this was just such a heartfelt callback, as his daughter, you know, loves the same thing that he loves. It was just so awesome to see, and so awesome for them to just give a little nod back to the original Iron Man 1. So after we say goodbye to Tony Stark, we see Captain America suiting up, ready to go through the quantum realm to return the Infinity Stones. Now, before he does this, he says goodbye to Sam, and then he says goodbye to Bucky, to which he states, "Don't do anything stupid." And then Bucky replies with, "How can I? You're taking all the stupid with you." And this is basically the same exchange that Steve and Bucky had back in the original Captain America, the First Avenger. And this was the last exchange that both of them had in that movie before Steve became Captain America. So obviously this was an amazing exchange for them to see return. And it was really the last exchange that Cap and Bucky had within the entire MCU before Steve goes back and stays back in the past and lives out his life with Peggy Carter. Then, of course, the final scene of Avengers Endgame, we see Cap finally getting that last dance with Peggy Carter. This is a callback and a reference, of course, to Captain America, the First Avenger, where Steve goes into the ice without ever having his last dance with Peggy. We also saw an iteration of this in Avengers Age of Ultron, where Steve's having a vision and he's having a vision of his dance with Peggy. Now, of course, that was a dream sequence, but this was actually happening, and this was an amazing scene to see it all come full circle again with the character of Captain America. He went into the ice, sacrificing his life and sacrificing the life he wanted to live with Peggy in order to save millions of people. Now, this all came full circle, of course, and he got that last dance with Peggy and lived out his life with her, as we saw when he was shaking hands with Sam after he gave him his shield and the mantle of Captain America. We see that Cap had a ring and he lived out the life that he always wanted to live with Peggy Carter. Another important callback to note within that last final scene of Cap dancing with Peggy is that they're dancing to a rendition of the song by Harry James called "It's Been a Long, Long Time." This is a callback to Captain America, the Winter Soldier, where we heard that song in that same movie. And it's also a callback to the scene where Steve is with Peggy in the hospital and she says, "It's been a long, long time." So with that scene wrapping up the whole movie, the credits begin to roll, and of course, all of us Marvel fans, by instinct, we stay till the end of those credits. And though there isn't a scene, we see the Marvel Studios logo arise as the credits have ended. But one really important thing to note is that there is a sound of a clanking metal. And a bunch of people were asking, what is this clanking metal? Now this is a callback to the first Iron Man 1, where Tony Stark was forging his first Iron Man suit and where he became Iron Man. And this is a callback to that film because that is the film that kicked off this whole 22 movie Infinity Saga. So that was the final callback in Avengers Endgame. So there you guys have it. Those are all of the callbacks in Avengers Endgame. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and see you guys next time.